Hello, Dion, and thanks for joining me on this Wednesday. It seems like Wednesday is actually a popular day to speak with insightful people. How's your day going so far?
Good. It's day whatever in lockdowns, so they kind of blur from one to the other. And I think what is definitely needed is, yeah, you have to kind of relearn boundaries very, very specifically. I think a lot of people are taking stress about having those transition zones. I've been a freelancer all my life, but even so, the lockdown situation is very, very different. So I'm telling a lot of business people to not only look at their businesses in terms of business model and what you need to rejig, but also not to forget that your entire workforce or whoever works for you or with you is also having somewhat of an existential crisis. So everything's going to change. Mindsets will change dramatically, from that, not just business. And I think everybody's focused on the business side of things, but not the human side of things.
I think it's a long time coming. I think that you've had a lot of people working in big companies, in big towers, really a little bit unaccommodating for us
Yes.
normal people. And now, whereas they would insist, well, we want you to fly from Johannesburg to Cape Town for a meeting because this is where we are, and it's that like mindset of this is how we do things around here. And I'd like to believe that you don't do things like that around here anymore.
Well, I think it was really interesting because even at Davos this year in January, there was a bit of a tipping point, and they announced a new form of capitalism, a new way forward of doing things. And I think the pressure last year, if I just look at the continuing, because I've had to do this quite a lot of people, because people are sort of obviously very focused on COVID-19 and what's happening now in the pandemic. And I say you've got to also take it into context with how we left 2019, and that was really, really significant because we left 2019 really angry. I mean, a quarter of the world's countries all had some kind of civil unrest and protests, mass protests. So Hong Kong was only the kind of the tip of the iceberg, but if you look at the entire Southern American content, almost every single country there, from Brazil to Chile, everybody had some sort of protest. And so there were two things that triggered those protests. So the one was a clamping down on media freedoms or democratic mechanisms. And then the other one was very, very small little surcharges. I think in Lebanon, it was like a 20-cent tax on using WhatsApp. In Chile, it was a 4% rise in subway fares. And just those little things sparked just, thousands of people onto the streets. So there was a very, very uneasy transition into 2020. And then if you put on top of that, I think what people have sort of parked on the side, but what was building up and building up, which I'm going back to the Davos thing about sort of a new kind of capitalism, was climate change. And so climate change was reaching this tipping point, and then the pandemic hit. But I think we're going to see a return of both forces of a rethinking after the pandemic, and then also what that means to climate change and the relationships of that.
Very nice. Well, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of things going on there. So you're a trend specialist, which is quite a unique thing. And, I believe that it used to be, tell us where we're going in the next 5 to 10 years. Well, now it's changed to what should we, what's going to happen next month, which is such a weird time gap. Okay, so now it's kind of like, well, if you're only thinking as a business 5 or 10 years ahead, now you're stuck, your pants are down and now the curtain's been moved and it's like, well, we took too long, we dragged our feet. So I guess really practically, as a trend analyst, you know, what do you think companies, the question is asked, what are you going to do about it? So now we're in that scenario. What are you going to do about business as normal? You've got your business world has crumbled in front of you, your systems that you're using, everything. So there's two parts to my question. Number one is, as a business, what are you going to do about it today, moving forward? Because you've run out of time. And then secondly, you as a person, what are you going to do about it? And then we can talk about my theory of you as a brand, and we'll go into that whole shift in mindset, not you as an employee. So please, it's two parts to my question. What are you going to do about it?
Well, I think
tough question.
It is, but there are answers, and the one thing, especially because I do quite a lot of work with business colleges, and then I have the privilege of actually speaking to a lot of senior leadership, which is a really good thing, because you speak to the decision makers who can make that. And what I always say, and I think that this is what we've been forced into at this stage. There's a wonderful article about the difference between a performance zone and a learning zone, and the analogy was that your top performing athletes spend 95 to 99% of their time in the learning zone. They practice, they train, and then that last 2-3% of the time is that performance zone, and they do amazing things in that. But it takes a lot of learning zone to do that. In business, it's reversed. We spend 95% of the time in a performance zone, and because of even pre-pandemic is all of your disruptions. So everybody's kind of just, I talk a lot about ambidextrous leadership, because every single company, whatever it is, you're trying to bring on some new technological system, you're trying to change the system, but you've got to keep the ship going at the same time. So you've got to try and move the two things very, very carefully, ambidextrously into one thing. Now that's been accelerated completely, because you don't have a choice. So when we talk about climate change is a difficult one to impress on, especially big corporates and multinationals, to try and change the habits, because it doesn't really affect us that much. It's kind of, we're sort of seeing it. Maybe if you were in Australia, you saw the bushfires, it might have sparked things a little bit closer to home. But it's kind of, it'll happen in 10 years. It's not really my problem. The pandemic has brought it up right there. There's no escaping it. Half the planet is in lockdown. So in terms of leadership into the business, you are now forced to go into learning zones. And everyone's taking a very, very quick and a very steep learning curve to try and say, how do we recalibrate, all of those things. And of course, I smile silently to myself, because all of these, there's a lot of technologies, a lot of systems that I've been saying we really got to do. I mean, 2-3 years ago already, there was a global HR survey from Mercer. And every single country, South Africa included, from Asia to South America to Europe, all of the respondents of that survey, all they wanted in terms of kind of working on the future of work was flexibility. And as you said, these big corporates, it's like, no, we want bums on seats, 9 to 5. We want to see you there. We don't measure productivity. We measure timekeeping and clocking and all of those kind of things. And now we're completely forced to redo things in a very, very different way, which unsettles everybody, because nobody's kind of used to this thing. And I'm having the same thing with a lot of the clients, which are at Flux. Our clients are all corporate clients. We're ready to migrate onto a digital platform and do that, but the clients are not. There's a lot of difficulties, whether it's security related, where it's just, we don't know how to do this. There's a lot of valid concerns.
What happens if the system never switches back on?
Yes. So it's all of those kind of things, and so that on the business side is what you need to do, and I think what it's been mentioned over and over again, but it's just worth mentioning again. We're just not going to go back to the same the new normal. Do
you think that the two words that a CEO or COO need to have coming out of their lips now at the moment is do it? Yes. Like, tell me what we should. Okay, do it. Do it. Do you think that They couldn't get those words out before. Now they.
Yeah, you absolutely forced, because you have to make decisions, and I think more importantly, you've got to stand by those decisions. So, that's what true leadership is about. Is you can have all the ideas, but if you want to implement them, and like you say, do it now, and then stand by that decision, that's a different thing as well.
That's an amazing thing that you say, because unfortunately, there's too many critics in the boardroom that will point a finger and say, you did that and we shouldn't have done. The problem is it's probably an ingrained thing that happens in the boardroom. It's the fear of, if I do this, I will be hectically accountable by the board for having done that. And so in essence, one doesn't do that. Yes. I'd rather just not, make that little mistake. Like, I know that some mistakes are massive, but that's the problem. So I don't want to go too much into that, but it's probably a thing is you're too accountable, because people are just like that's what happened with corporal punishment.
Yes.
Well, very nice, your kids are misbehaving. You want to teach them, give them a little crack. Oh, they won't do it again. Well, good quality human beings. But now it's, you're abusing your children. I won't do it. Now what do you have? You have knife attacks in London. Well, that's the culture, isn't it? Anyway, I don't want to get too far off track. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? Please carry on about the businesses, and then we can go more into the personal.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of C-suite, I also say to people, and I think that's particularly pertinent this time round, is like if you're in the C-suite, whether you're the CFO, the CEO, the COO, you need to change all of those acronyms. You all have to be CLOs, Chief Learning Officers now, because we are basically in that zone. You've got to be in that learning zone. You've got to be Chief Learning Officer, and you've got to also, I think in this time, it's my pet kind of peeve is so when I look, and I delve a lot into kind of why companies don't innovate. So that becomes very, very pertinent now, and how to scale innovation in large companies. And one of the things that really stunts it is exactly where we are having to migrate, or being forced to migrate, from a corporate structure. So hierarchies and silos kill innovation. Especially what you were mentioning is, if you have that hierarchy and there's sign-offs, the higher you go, you've got to keep signing things off. People are not going to stick their necks out, because I don't want my head to be chopped off, so I'd rather just pull back and not have that radical idea. But what people fundamentally miss or don't get right is that innovation is basically challenging the status quo. If you're going to shake something up, if you want to innovate, you're going to have to challenge the status quo. And I'm very, very passionate about a younger workforce. And specifically, I've been tracking Gen Zs, who are now 21, 22. They are now, if you're a consumer-based company, they are now your consumer. If you are a parent of teenagers, you know that all along, because people say to me, yeah, but they don't have disposable income. And I say, look, if you're a parent, you know that your teenager has been manipulating the family budget all these years. Who decides what you eat during the week? Who decides where you go on holiday? Who decides what tech you buy? Who researches the tech for you? All of those kind of things. Now that they're coming into the workforce, they're not only the customer, but they're also your workforce, and they're very different. I say to people, if you had problems with millennial workforces, then you ain't seen nothing yet, because the social justice barometer of this workforce is very, very different. And why, if they are the first generation of true digital natives, why do we not ask how they would do things in the digital realm? Because I mean, they've been sort of self-deprecating and calling themselves the Zoomers, so like Zoom, before everybody started using Zoom, because they were so proficient on it. So it's exactly those kind of things. It's like ducks to water to technology, to new systems, to do all those things. And you saw, I call it the Marmite effect, Greta Thunberg. You either love her or you really hate her. so
I just want to say, if Greta is watching this, I don't want to do anything that upsets her. God forbid. God forbid. We should upset Greta.
But that's exactly the point, is that especially in a South African context, we know that if you have a section of society that's been completely marginalized, and if they have nothing to lose and they protest, that's the most dangerous force. So you look at this new generation, and they have nothing to lose because they've got everything to gain for their future. So that's why they're so vocal. That's why the social justice barometer is really, really so high. And I say to companies, if you're a consumer-based company, if you're not going to be very transparent about your values, you're not going to get brand loyalty, which is rare anyway. And if you're not going to get brand loyalty, those guys are sure as hell not going to come and want to work for your company. Every company wants to get that new talent in.
So, you know what? It's such an amazing thing. I promise you, we're two peas in the same pod. What's it? Two peas in the same pot. I also talk about millennials, how to hire and attract them. And my thinking was, and this, I conceptualized before COVID-19. I even did a workshop on it. Is you needed to make your office Instagram friendly.
Yes.
They want to be proud of where they work. They want to be able to share pictures. They want to show that their CEO does the Ironman, and they're part of a brand that stands for something. But also, they see disruption as completely normal. So which is dangerous, because it means that they're not going to fit into your rules. You have to learn to work with them. Why? Because it's not the people work here for 5-10 years anymore mentality. It's the instant gratification. And you need to work around them. You rather need to make it favorable and include them, but then there's a tricky balance in including them. You don't want to put them in the boardroom and let them just be like a bull in a china shop, because they will, because they have absolutely no idea how to shut the mouth off. They just blah, 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 So it's a tricky balance between thinking of it from their side and including them, which is kind of like what we do in a weird sort of a way. We're a new age business, but I completely agree with what you're saying in dealing with millennials and Generation Z.
So, I mean, for anybody who's watching this and is just a naysaying, saying, well, and the general thing that I get is, well, they don't understand the business, they don't understand the industry, so the opinions don't really matter. I went to a very fascinating identity politics. So looking at identity and inclusion in New York, and I mean they're at a completely different level to the rest of the world. So everything's almost too PC. But what was really interesting was a case study. And so when I say to people, okay, if you feel uncomfortable about listening to the opinions of a younger workforce who maybe are not there, think about that disruption, about the status quo. Because if you are in, say, financial services, you know that the biggest threat to banking is not going to come from the banking sector. It's going to be a social media platform that suddenly creates some financial services, which is already happening, and that's the bigger threat than that. So the case study in New York was amazing. They said they did a hospital, and I think every company, well, especially now post-pandemic, is going to be trying to streamline processes. You want to make your business more efficient. You want to make things run quicker, seamlessly, all of those things. So they wanted to do that to a hospital, and they brought this company in. They did the usual things. They spoke to all of the doctors. They spoke to the nurses, they spoke to the admin staff, and they sort of said, how can we improve things? At the end of it, the one guy shared, and that just stayed in my mind. He said the most valuable insights that came from speaking to everybody came from the security guard that stood in emergency services at the door. He says he gave the best insights because he sat and he watched people having hissy fits, people breaking down the sort of the bureaucracy, the red tape, all of those kind of things. And they just said, we should have actually gone to him first to do that. So I say that's sort of getting the eyes of a child in a very, very different way. So find the new ideas from wherever it comes from the company, and break those silos and break those hierarchies, because you're going to get new ideas that are very, very different.
Beautiful. So I want to say two things, and then I'd like you to sort of take us through the reality. Sometimes when I'll give like a homeless person some change that I have in my pocket, and they'll say, God bless you, I immediately say, Amen, because I don't know the depth of that person's soul and insight at a universal soul level. Like you think, oh, they're just a homeless person. How powerful is their blessing? So the reality is, if you treat people equally, you might find that the security guard who might seem insignificant is actually your point person. Absolutely. It's about a mindset of where is your energy and insight coming from. So I agree completely. So I just want to say one more thing, and then I'd like you to take us home. We've got about another 7 or 8 minutes. So we've understood from a corporate perspective where to from here in this new trend. Like, it looks like the dogs are barking, we'll push through. And but you as a person navigating this fourth industrial revolution, this mindset of collaboration, working, interacting with other partners, what we call a consortium. We're a consortium of actuaries that work as a lean business in this digital age. We've got clients all over the world. You as a person, what is the trend for the next year for you to interact? You're not an employee anymore. You're a brand, you're a person. What is the trend moving forward of how people can interact with this new digital world that we find ourselves in, and make something of themselves and earn money to survive? What is that? What does it look like over the next year practically?
Yeah, look, I think the next year is a very good time frame, because we're not going to get a vaccine within the next year. So the behaviors that we are getting accustomed to now are they're not long term, but they're definitely not short term. They're medium term kind of thing. You're going to think twice about getting on that flight again, to do that, and you're probably going to walk off if not everybody's wearing a mask on those kinds of things. So those behaviors change very, very quickly. The one thing is, I think, especially just on the platform, that what we're doing at the moment is that realization. You talked about everybody having that personal brand, and the kind of the broadcasting has kind of democratized, or what the pandemic has done is kind of democratized that. So people are actually saying, if you're going back to business, but this is also a personal thing, that a company or a whatever spokesperson, their job is actually diminished now, because we're actually now all our own spokespeople. We've got to kind of get the lighting right, and you've got to get your setup right. All of those things, we've learned those lessons really, really quickly. So your personal brand is really important, and I think if I go back and swing it back to this younger generation, a digital native, is they understand that personal brand the minute they sign up for a social media account, and that happens depending on the parents. At 15, 16, whatever, you understand your brand value. And I think this is really important in terms of your personal growth and going forward. Is we're going to learn to have to keep learning all the time. And I've been advocating that for a very, very long time. But when I speak to especially HR practitioners, and they're a little bit more in a traditional mindset, I say to them, you've got to, especially with a younger workforce, and I think with all of us now, is you're going to, if we've all had this existential crisis, you're going to start looking at life and reevaluating what was important. Is that, I'm a bit sorry, but not really sorry for the whole sort of influencer culture that's happening, because in this pandemic, everyone's like, well, you're trying to flog me a flashy handbag. That's not going down well at the moment. So it's those kind of values that have recalibrated. And so people are going to start looking at different things, and that career trajectory is going to change completely. So we're going to start understanding the value of a career portfolio. So it's a very, very different thing. And especially if there's parents watching here, please keep that word in your head again, a career portfolio. It is not one trajectory that person is going to do for the next 40 or 50 years. It is going to be zigzagging and changing. And if you have a Gen Z child, there's going to be a side hustle. There will always be a side hustle. There's an entrepreneurial thing. You're going to change tax. You're going to jump sector to sector. So in that next year, I think, is prepare yourself to change lanes, to be easy with changing lanes, and to thinking, I will land on my feet, and there will be something happening. I normally show a slide in my talks that illustrates this. So one is casino machines, slot machines, and then on the other hand, there's the cover of your smartphone with all of the apps. And if you put the two together, they look very, very similar. And the reason why I show that slide is because one of the biggest poachings that were happening in the last 2 years in Silicon Valley was app developers and people, software developers and phone developers, were poaching people from the casino industry because they designed slot machines and they know how to keep you addicted to that machine with bells and whistles and haptic effects and all of those things. And they brought those people to design your apps on your smartphone, because that is the Silicon Valley business models. You want to keep idle time as long as possible. So who knew that you, as a casino designer, suddenly working in Silicon Valley, and I've just been seeing that for the past 3-4 years, you're going to change. So don't expect yourself to be in that one lane all the time. You will change, and be very, very thankful, and see it as a new regenerating, reinvigorating thing to kind of change lanes, go into a different sector, and keep a portfolio of skills, so you have that career portfolio going ahead.
Unbelievable. So in closing off, what is your prediction as far as what will be in South Africa over the next in a year, like just in general?
Yeah,
and it's a super hectic question to answer, but what do you reckon?
It is, and there's a bit of a super hectic answer coming as well, is because I don't think we've seen the peak yet of this. We're only about to go into winter, so we haven't even factored in the kind of living conditions in informal sectors, in townships, all of those kind of things. And if we look at patterns, say in places like Singapore contained it very, very quickly. Their blind spot were their migrant workers who live in very similar conditions to our main workforce in informal settlements and in townships. And that's where the second wave of that started happening. So we're going into winter, we're going to that. Like I said, the lockdown is going to be at least a medium-term kind of thing. We're going to have to get used to it a lot. And I think what those lessons coming out of that, again, I'm going to go into a very, very personal, maybe much more of a esoteric one, but I think we mustn't underestimate what we've discovered of, yes, we want to get out, we want to kind of be human again, and that's the human reaction. But we've also understood that we can survive with less. We don't need all of that kind of stuff. So I think consumption patterns are going to change very, very radically. Your social interaction is going to be very, very different. The people that matter to you, and I'm sorry to say this, but you find out who your friends are in times like this, so who you really want to connect with, and what is important in those things, and that is going to frame your life. And that's why I say to business leaders and owners is look at that human existential crisis over and above the pandemic crisis, because that is going to lead where the business goes and how it does it, how people want to work, what the rewards are. It's yes, it's always money, but it's not always money, and there's different ways of doing things. So it's going back to how we opened up this thing is that Davos thing is a new form of capitalism. So capitalism's not going to go away, but we can be a lot more empathetic. So even before this, with climate change, every company's ESG rating, your environmental social governance, rather than CSI, was becoming more important. And I think that is going to be when we come out of this 2021, ESG, environment, climate change will come back into it. And by then, a whole new batch of Gen Zs will be in your workforce, and they'll be calling you out.
Beautiful. Well, I can definitely fly my own flag and say that my entire house is completely off the grid.
Good. Fantastic.
Solar, and we put energy back in, actually. And you just have to time the pool pump and the sprinkler pump and the washing machine so that it's during the peak sunlight.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, we believe strongly in energy, but very, 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 very importantly, green love towards those that work in our consortium. Because that is not you're an employee, but rather this is a partnership. We want you to live well. We want you to be happy. We want you to earn well. Because if you earn well, and this is speaking to any executives that are watching this, is that if those that work in your organization earn well and are happy and their families are taken care of and they're being rewarded the same as the organization, well, that's a symbiotic relationship. That is not the one is eating the other. It's a beautiful union. So our thinking is that's the way that we treat those in our organization, because that's how we can take over the world together. And it's a bit of a different mindset of, we're a corporate, you work here, easy come, easy go, you'll get up the ranking, and then you'll got your bonus and you get your watch at the end of the year, although they don't even give you a watch anymore, But so I just think that, what you're saying about the environment and the world, in my opinion, should also go into the lifestyle of those that work in your organization. Any final thoughts on that specifically?
Well, there's for many years, going back to HR, the whole old adage of work-life balance is actually obsolete. It's work-life flexibility, and like you say, it's a symbiotic relationship, and people, and especially I keep going back to that younger mindset, but for that mindset is I don't want a job, I want a lifestyle, and it's exactly what you're speaking of. Yes, you've got a job, but you earn well. It blends within what you do, and the happier you have a workforce, or like you say, your partners or people that work in that company, the better your company is going to be anyway. It's a no-brainer to do that, and we really have to get rid of this kind of corporate mindset that was spawned in the early 20th or late 19th century. It's completely not right for a digital era in 2021. So kiss it goodbye and say thank you very much. Do a Marie Kondo. You don't spark joy anymore, and find something else that sparks joy in your life.
Choice words, very beautiful. I've thoroughly enjoyed this wonderful conversation with you. I look forward to interacting some more. And let's go and let's reclaim, if it's difficult, let's reclaim 2020. And it was like, January, 2020, it was difficult. So let's reclaim 2020.
Yes, I agree. Good. Thanks, Adi.
Have a beautiful day. Take care. Cheerio. Bye.
Bye.